Hello, my name is Briar. Welcome to my channel where I'm documenting my journey from a passionate writer of fantasy novels to one day a published writer of fantasy novels. And that journey is going to take a very long time because I'm nowhere near ready to publish anything right now, but it's a journey, so here we go. For today's video, I want to take a quick second and talk about why I specifically refer to myself as a novelist and not just a writer of short stories or poems or nonfiction or things like that, because I do specifically think of myself as a writer first, and subtype of writer is a novelist. And there's a couple reasons for that. While in the past I have written more than novel-length things, I have written poems, I have attempted to write short stories, I've written a couple of different flavors of writing, but I really settled into the novelist shtick because I really like that format. I like being able to explore things in a long form, which is why I post YouTube videos and not so much TikToks or anything like that, because short form, if you haven't noticed, I talk a lot. You don't even see how much I cut out of these videos because I talk a lot. I like long form. And I really discovered this about myself because I tried to write short stories from high school to now, basically, and I've failed at writing short stories like every single time. When I was in college, I took a lot of creative writing classes. And in those classes, basically all that we read were short stories because, shorter chunks, semester-long classes, we could get through a ton of short stories in the time it would take us to get through one or two novels. And so we focused all of our writing ideas and things on short stories. And in my head, that meant that short stories were smaller and more manageable. And in that made it faster and easier to write short stories than novels. And going through my own writing journey, I have discovered that is very, very wrong. Short stories, like poetry, are shorter, and therefore every single word you choose has to be impactful. It has to pack a punch. It has to be chosen carefully to get the feeling you want to the reader without being able to expound on it for paragraphs and pages and chapters and long form. And I like navel gazing. I like doing the long form exploration of things. And so that's why I've always failed at writing short stories. The first memorable short story fail that I have was actually my undergraduate capstone project, where I was comparing writing fan fiction to writing original fiction. And to do that, I had to write short stories in both genres. For the original fiction, I was writing something about like a meteor apocalypse. Like, we find out that a meteor is going to hit the Earth in like less than a day, and there's nothing we can do to stop it. So it's an exploration of what do people do at the end of the world when there's literally nothing we can do to stop it, and everybody's going to die in a cataclysmic event. And in writing that story, my professor, who was helping me craft it, looked at my first draft and said to me, "There's no story here. I started with a premise and I ended it. But there was no character development. There was no tension. There was no development of the characters." And so I had to take that short story, which was already long for a short story, and cut out a lot of it so that I could add in more impactful pieces. And it was really, really hard. And I will say that with this comparison between writing original fiction and writing fan fiction, the fan fiction was also hard. Both of these were hard because I did the same thing. I wrote the beginning, I wrote the end, there was no middle, and it was already too long. So I had to learn to concisely build tension and develop character. And I ended up writing, I think, like 15,000 words for each of those stories, or more, probably more, and that's really long for a short story. So it was hard, and I only kind of didn't fail. But it was an exploration of the writing process more so than the finished product, so I got a good grade on my capstone. In a similar way, when I was in post-university life, I tried to write a short story with feedback from my writing group. And I wrote a fantasy story about witches, and that was also kind of like a post-apocalyptic world where they'd kind of released demons and destroyed the world. Apocalyptic fiction, that's my short story style. I don't know. But in writing this witch apocalypse short story, I wrote 5,000 words, figured it was pretty decent, shared it with my writing group, and got a lot of questions that sparked my desire to explore this world more and explore the characters more. And I ended up writing as if that short story that I'd originally written was an ending, and I went backwards and ended up writing so much about the buildup of this world and these witches that I ended up with something that's much closer to between a novella and a full-length novel of a story. And I kept adding more characters and developing more of the magic system and the culture of the world and explaining that in the story. And it just got really, really long because the world and the questions I was asking about this world and about these characters just got too big for a short story. Could I possibly edit it down to something that would make sense in a shorter form? Yes. Would that be appealing to me as a human and a writer? No. So I gave up on calling that a short story as well. Fail number 2. And just like that sort of set the theme for any time I would try to write a short story. I would either make it too long and not detailed enough to actually be an impactful short story, or it would build a life of its own and it would become way too long because I had too many characters, too many questions, too many plot lines, too much world building. And then by the time I had all that, I didn't want to edit it down into a short story anymore, so it just became a long story. A novel, if you will. And that's sort of where I fell into calling myself a novelist before any other form of writing, because I think I've had one successful short story that I have finished at less than 10,000 words and been satisfied with. And that was in like 2017, before I'd ever finished a novel and before I'd ever finished anything longer than 10, 20,000 words. And I don't think I would ever want to go back to writing short stories. Like, maybe short stories as backstory to my longer stories, to my bigger worlds, or short stories as prequels or build-ups or something, but always something interconnected with a greater world. Because I like building huge interconnected magic systems and worlds and governments and things. And I find that really to be the most fascinating and fantastic part of writing. So I don't want to write short stories anymore. And that makes it really hard to get into things like anthologies or to try to develop my writing style to be tighter because I like the bigger things. So, I don't really have a purpose to this video besides explaining why novels really work for me more so than other forms of writing. Do you like to write short stories? Are you more successful at getting a question answered in less than 10,000 words than I am? Because I don't know how to do that anymore, and I don't know if I ever want to go back. Like, do I want to try? Maybe. I had an idea for a short story that I think would work really well only as a short story. However, as I was writing down a outline for that short story to tackle at a later time when I'm not doing Camp NaNoWriMo, I ended up developing a backstory for all of the characters, and suddenly I have enough material that I could make it into a novella or novel again. The most important part I could probably put into a short story, but the material is there to make it longer, and that's sort of my vibe. I like to make things longer. I also blame my writing group. They didn't help me. I would say, this is a short story, and they would say, tell me more about this character and this world, and how does this work, and why is this here, and how did you find this, and where did this come from, and tell me more, tell me more, tell me more. Which didn't help when I was trying to write a short story. Love them. Love you guys. But yeah. So what kind of writer are you? Are you a writer of novels? A writer of short stories? A writer of poetry? I tried my hand at poetry. I'm really bad at it. Let's not look at any of my poetry. I have notebooks full of poems, and they're all bad. They're all really bad. But they're fun to write, to play with. Do you have any of the problems that I have with writing short stories? Do you make your worlds too big? Do you struggle with making your worlds too big or big enough? I would love to hear about how you define yourself as a writer, because, again, I have my lived experiences and they are completely limited to my life, and I want to know about you. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in my next video, which will hopefully be out on Monday, but this posting schedule is getting harder. We'll see what happens. Oh, maybe not Monday, maybe Tuesday. I'm going out of town. Okay, anyway. Thank you so much for watching, and see you in the next one.